So my name is Tove Holm, and I come from the Network for Sustainable Development in the Nordic Network for Adult Education. And I'm really happy that we have so many participants here today. And this is the third webinar we have on this subject, enhancing sustainable development. There. So this is our speakers today, me, Tove Holm, and Henrika Nordin. We are coming from the Nordic Network for Sustainable Development in the Nordic Network for Adult Learning. And then Judith Klein, she's coming from Teachers Education in Norway. And Anna Kivimäki-Pelus was also on her way, but unfortunately she could not attend today, so she will not be joining us this day. But we have rearranged our plans, so we will manage hopefully just fine. But I think I will give the word to Henrika directly. Welcome.
Yes, I'm Henrika Nordin, as Tove said, and I've been a member of the network since 2015, when I started to work as a director of Bildningsalliansen, which is an umbrella organization for folkbildning in Finland, for the Swedish-speaking folkbildning. When I got this task to tell you a little bit about the network, but also about a one-pager that we just published a month ago or so, I was thinking that how could I describe our network in one sentence, which is pretty hard, but I think that our slogan could be "Together we can make a change," because I think that is what we are doing in the network. We want to do this sustainability work with each other and with other people, and we will also want to make some kind of a change. We see that there is a change needed in our society and in the world for a more sustainable future for all of us. And I tried to put some goals or values that we have in our network, and I think that's one thing, is to get people together, all kinds of people. We want to work with the educators, we want to work with the universities, with the business world, and with the civic society. As the more diverse our group is, the better it is for sustainability issues. And when we get together, we need to reflect and use critical thinking when we are talking about sustainability. We have to question things as they are today and how we want to see the future. And when we do that together with others, we also come to the transformation thing, because that's one thing that is really central in our network, is the transformation. We work a lot with transformative pedagogy, but also with transformation in individuals and in groups. And when that happens, we also want to, of course, share that with others and engage others to come along in our work. So we also invite you to be in contact with us if you want to, and we have the same kind of issues that we are thinking about. And I always, myself, when I think about sustainability, I always ask myself, the things that I do, am I doing it just to get a good standard of living, or is it more about living a good life? And I think we have to, especially in the Nordic content, which we are the countries that consume the most in the world. So we have to ask, is it better if we somehow emphasize on a good life instead of just getting a higher standard of living all the time? But in our network, for about, I think it's a year and a half ago, we started to discuss, are we actually living as we are teaching in the network? I think we had a lot of meetings when we discussed about how can we as a network be more sustainable. And we came up with an agreement that we called Röda Berg Agreement, because we happened to be in Helsinki at the moment when we did the agreement and signed it. And that agreement turned into the one-pager that NVL made a month ago. And we have about 8 points or aspects that we think is something that the network can ask itself every now and then, so that we actually know that we as a network work sustainable and that the activities we do as well are sustainable. And one question to ask in a network when we are working in a Nordic content is, of course, why do we meet? Do we meet because it's a tradition or it's a routine? Or do we actually meet because it's a good thing to physically meet and to go through the activities we are planning or the work we are attending to do? And how often should we meet? How often should we meet physically, and how often can we meet online? So we, for example, in the network discussed about maybe we could just meet once a year, but for 3 days instead of a day and a half. And then we work intensively on something. And then we have every month an online meeting instead, just to be more sustainable. And then we don't have to travel so much, because the traveling is, of course, something that it's not that sustainable. I know that many of our members in the network, we have 9 members, and from all Nordic countries. Many of us are traveling by train, because it's in Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, you can travel by train. But of course, our Icelandic member has to take the plane to be able to come to our meetings. And also when we meet in a Nordic country, we always ask, how can we find accommodation, restaurants, venues for our meetings that have a sustainable solution? They can have an environmentally certificate, but they can also be a social corporation that work with immigrants or with unemployed. And we have actually, we have some links that we have put in the paper that you can go and click on to see how you can find sustainable solutions, for example, in Sweden or Finland or Denmark and so on. And this is something that all of us can do when we meet in a Nordic environment. Then for me, I think 2 very important questions that we have and that we should always kind of reflect on, at least every year when we do our action plan for the next year, is that when we meet physically somewhere, how can we contribute to the local community? And that is, of course, that we can we share the knowledge that we have or the experience that we have with somebody else? Or can we look up people that could teach us something? Or can we just share things with them? And this is also something that adds values to our work, and at the same time, as adult educators, we also learn at the same time. And then maybe the most important question or thing to think about is to be self-critical. And I'm very happy to be in a network that have members from all the Nordic countries. We are very different in many ways. We have a common interest in sustainability issues, but we see them differently, and sustainability is very complex. So we don't always agree, or it takes time before we agree on something. And that is actually the best thing about it, because then you have to be a little bit critical about the things we are doing. And that is something that makes the network develop in its own thinking, and also to develop the activities we are doing. Yeah, so we actually hope that if you're interested to be in contact with us, please do so. We like to share our knowledge with you. You can find us on NVL's website, and you can also find the one-pager on the website. The one-pager can also be clicked on here. Here's the link here in my presentation that you will get afterwards. And of course, you can also be in contact with me if you want to. But I think that's about it. I don't know if there's any questions for me or for Tove. So.
Okay, so we have made this questionnaire in Mentimeter. So this is a questionnaire that we have opened during the entire webinar. So I would ask you to go to this address, menti.com, and then you enter this code 255955-2. I've also put the same address in the chat. So then we will look at the results. It asks 3 things, but you can just add 1 and enter. So it will come to the word cloud. And then if something pops up, you can go back there and add more. I will myself continue. And as I mentioned in the beginning, so my name is Tove Holm, and I also come from the same network as Henrika just presented, the Nordic Network for Sustainable Development. And I will shortly talk about what is actually education for sustainable development and how has it been enhanced in the Nordic countries and globally. So if we go a little bit back. So the first time sustainable development was mentioned was in 1987 in the so-called Brundtland report. And that's the picture on the left-hand side. And the crucial thing here is that already from then it was talked about these 3 sustainability aspects: the environmental, the economic, and social. So just in short, if you want to think about what sustainable development means, it's about taking both the environmental, the economic, and the social aspects into account when you make a decision. So that's in the core for sustainable development. At the moment, we are following the UN sustainability goals, and we also here have this goal number 4 as focus in all our webinars. And these were adopted in 2015 globally. And then if we look at what actually education for sustainable development means, so we had the concept of sustainable development, and pretty soon after that, it was already in the beginning of the 90s, it was noticed that education is crucial for enhancing sustainable development. And UN actually had this decade for education for sustainable development from 2005 to 2014, just before these new sustainability goals were adopted. And then education for sustainable development was enhanced globally and a lot in the Nordic countries. And I have worked my time in Finland. So here also the Ministry of Education had a really lot of different projects during this time. And the reason why it's so important, because it's our children and our youth who are the future leaders for all labor markets. So it's actually them who will make these decisions after 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. So therefore it's so important to start with it already at young age. And the goal is that not considering, it doesn't matter what they have studied, what degree program they have studied at, that they could take the economic, the environmental, and the social costs and benefits into consideration when they make the decisions. So that's actually the goal, that whatever you have studied, that you would have this knowledge and this skill to do it and take this into consideration. So that's what we are working for. And it's about cross-disciplinary approaches, holistic, systematic thinking that are crucial when you think about this, that you can't just be within your own field or in your own degree program. So it's very important also to cooperate. And this one picture that I have here on the right hand side, that's from the city of E in Finland, which is a small city in the northern part of Finland. And this is from last spring when BBC News, they did this news clip. You can actually watch it on YouTube, I think. And there they are actually telling about how this city of E has managed to involve their children, because they have environmental education at school, and then they have noticed that the children take also this home. So this is also something that has I would say, a plus effect, that when you talk about these things in school and in education, then of course you will also bring it to your parents. So that's also one thing they have noticed there. Then, as I mentioned, we have 17 different goals, UN goals for sustainable development. And one of them is this fourth, to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. So that's, of course, a very important goal if you look globally, that actually all people would have the possibility to educate themselves. But under this are smaller targets, and one of them is this 4.7, and there is the goal to ensure that all leaders acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development. And there are mentioned sustainable development, sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace and non-violence, global citizenship, appreciation of cultural diversity, and of culture's contribution to sustainable development. So these are things that are mentioned for education for sustainable development as goals. Then if we go back, I also want to tell my story, how I came into this network. So it was in 2010 in the autumn. So I was contacted and asked to answer this survey about how adult education for sustainable development is enhanced in Finland. So this was a study that was made in the entire Nordic countries, and all countries participated. And then actually after this, we started this network. So this was done for the Nordic Council of Ministers and asked by them to be done. And what we found in that study, a lot of things, but I took two things here. That actually one thing was that there is a need for new knowledge and attitude changes, also among adults and in civil society. And then there should be openness to collaboration across sectors and the ability to accept and develop different learning paths. So this we started then in 2011 in the spring. We started in this network and started working for these goals. And then we developed an adult education for sustainable development, a Nordic one, and we had it twice, from 2014 to 15 and in 2016. And here on the picture on the right hand side, you can see it's from one of the sessions at Samsø Island in Denmark from the second course. And so we had about 20 participants from all Nordic countries, and all these are adults working, interested in education or working with education. And they had some development project at their own workplace that they worked with and developed during the course. And here on the left-hand side, I have taken 4 examples from the second course, the one that we had in 2016. And the first is Alli from Finland. So she's teaching photography, and she chose this theme, wasted food. She asked her students to take photograph of when you have made food from wasted food. So she used these visual approaches to environmental education in her class. And then the second one, Ragna from Norway. She worked at a hostel, and she planted this garden, and there she planted plants and herbs that are used and has been used in Norway for decades, and used in making food and like this. So she actually had this food culture and community approach to her project. And so this was, of course, taking care together with the students, the actual garden. And then Nomi from the Faroe Islands, she teaches textiles. So she took this cultural view to her teaching and teach the students at her university and about how you can, through textiles, this textiles approach to sustainability. And then my fourth example is Jørgen from Denmark. He was developing this biking route, and he worked with a lot of companies and a lot about sustainable traveling. So that was kind of his approach to his project. Then a year ago, the Nordic Council of Ministers published their new vision that the Nordic countries would be world's most sustainable region. And here also its education is actually emphasized in this. And then in the spring, as I mentioned, these UN goals are followed in many different places, and here are 4 reports from the spring: the global, the Nordic, and the Finnish, and then a local city that I'm working at, city of Turku in Finland. And I looked into these reports and looked at what are they talking about, what things have been done and what should be emphasized in the coming years. And they have one thing in common, that they all say that there is an urgent need for internal cooperation for sustainable development without forgetting local, national, and international cooperation. So this means that both, you should not be seeing these sustainability goals, even that they are 17, they should not be seen as separate projects, but they should be enhanced together, and always also that there should be more cooperation both locally and globally. And just one final thing, that they have noticed that there are 6 transformations that should be done to achieve the goals. And one of them is that there should be further investment in lifelong learning. I could maybe ask Henrika here that what would you say, how did you get interested in sustainability?
Well, actually, it was something that I have from childhood, because my dad is a farmer, and in the wintertime we used to be in the woods to make chop trees and stuff, and I also had my little brother with me, and we loved, of course, to play around in the woods and be very loud. And my dad always said, please be quiet, because this is the home of the animals. And I think to have lived in the countryside and just this experience as a child, it's just very natural for me to be close to the nature. And of course, then when I used to be a principal at a folk high school before, and actually the NVL network had their course there. The first course that the Nordic Network for Sustainable Development held was there. So then I just got into those issues from a folk building perspective.
Great, thank you. Well, as I mentioned, you can, during the entire webinar, put more questions in the chat. So I will pick them up from there. But there is none at the moment, and then you can also find the Menti that actually works now. But I think that I will next give the word to Judith. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Tove. Can everyone hear me quite well? That's excellent. It's nice. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm I have been looking forward to meet all of you. So please keep your video there, because it's so much nicer to talk to human beings rather than just a screen. Okay, let me start by introducing myself. My motivation towards this field of education for sustainable development, that started actually partly as a teacher in the classroom, where it started with myself questioning, are we teaching the pupils and our future generation those things that are most important for them to learn for the future? And that question was nagging me for a while, quite a while, so much that I realized that I couldn't be in the classroom, because my question was now on that, my answer was now. So after that, I've been inspired by NGOs and worked for the NGOs. So and that started also with input from social movements in Latin America, actually, I have to say. So I've been working within this field for around 12 years. And I have tried to work with this field of education for sustainable development from different angles. So it has been quite an, for me, quite an interesting travel. So after being a teacher and working within this field from an NGO perspective, I also was happy to be hired into the Ministry of Education and the Directorate for Education to work hands-on with changing the curricula, and especially having the responsibility for sustainable development into that curricula. And when we ended that process, I have now started to do research on the same field. So that was my background. But I want to just admit that my identity is as a teacher and as an activist, primarily, more than a researcher, even though I have that role. All right, so I have called my presentation Implementation of SDG 4.7, and I will talk about Norway as an example. I've divided this presentation into four parts. I'm going to talk about what is new in our context. I'm going to talk about key success factors, some key challenges, and the fourth part I will make an interactive part that includes all of you. All right, I'd like to start with this quote from Albert Einstein. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. And that's because I think this is a really crucial and important part of the intention with the whole SDG 4.7 and the field that we are working on. As both Henrika and Tove mentioned, SDG 4.7 is about all learners' acquired knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development and global citizenship. And what is important with this target is also, as well as what Tove and Henrika has already mentioned, is also that it is acknowledged finally as crucial, as a key factor for achieving all the SDGs. And that's historically first time that this field has been acknowledged that way. So keeping that in mind, I would also add that education for sustainable development is related to the field of global citizenship education, of many other fields that are working for education for something, like global education, development education, peace education, human rights education. And since I was happy to be part of the process making this target, a really important aspect was to make all these fields coming together into the targets rather than being fragmented as it used to be 10 years ago. All these areas were really fragmented, and it was a competition of funding towards whether global education, development education, or education for sustainable development. But honestly, there are no contradictions between them. We can all try to unify them rather than stay in the fragmentations. Okay. This target do have indicators, and they are 4. So they're going to be measured in indicators. A is education for sustainable development and global citizenship integrated into national education policies? Is ESD or GCE integrated into national curricula? C is teachers' education, and D is student assessment. Just to add a little bit, I would like to also put up this quote because the intention behind SDG Target 4.7, it was a long, huge fight to make this agenda into the mainstream agenda. And Hodge in UNESCO said that sustainable development cannot be achieved by political agreements, financial incentives, and technological solutions alone. We need to change how we think and act, and that is where education has a critical role to play. No doubt education is shaped by society, but education can also shape society in profound ways. In the Norwegian context, we use this as part of our core argumentation to make a space for discussions on what kind of education we would need. So that's why I'm showing this quote actually. All right. So what's new in our Norwegian context? So I'm talking now about our experiences in Norway as an example. Although I'm fully aware that everything when it comes to education is related to context and culture. But this is as an example. What has happened? What has happened in a very summarized way is that we had a reform of the formal education sector that was fought through by the non-formal education sector. So what has happened is that we have changed our national curricula, and it's a lot of change with that, but the most important aspect of that change is that 3 new cross-curricular main topics is now mainstreamed into all curricula in every subject and every level. So these 3 cross-curricular main topics is sustainable development, democracy and citizenship, and health and life skills. So these are mainstreamed from primary school, every level, up to high school. And we are really proud of that. We still have some challenges, I must admit, like with subjects as math, for example. But we are really proud that they are already there, and then we still have to work on it. Another important aspect, if you look at this picture on the right side, we also worked a lot in regarding what is learning actually, and what kind of relationship should a teacher and the learners have. And we try to, in the curricula, use some quotes from Paulo Freire. Paulo Freire from Brazil, he was saying that to be able to learn anything, each person has to be feeling safe and confident. Without feeling safe and confident in their feelings, they won't be able to learn anything. So that's why an active participatory learning approach is more visible in our curricula now than it used to be. Okay. Another summary, we are now so happy to say that SDG 4.7 can be said to be integrated in both formal and non-formal education sector. So it's in the framework for kindergartens, it's in primary school, as I mentioned, it's in secondary school, it's in adults education and folk high schools, and they were actually long before the formal sector. And it's also in the NGOs development education and awareness raising work. And that the 2 last points with the adult education and folk high schools, including NGOs, that those are factors that made the formal sector change actually, to be honest. And both Kirsten Parby and Brita Puti that I saw was here have been part of that important process. And I'm not sure whether this sector actually acknowledged how important they were during the whole process. Mission that we have not completed is higher education and teachers education. So I'm going to go back to that. So related to indicators of 4.7.1, we can say that national education policies we have and national curricula we have, but we lack C, indicator C, and absolutely indicator D. And I also want to make a point of it. I don't think it is enough to change white papers and national curricula. We have to work with teachers all the time. But I think everything starts with the national curricula and the white papers in order to get a change on an impact level, to be honest, from my perspective. Okay, then I'm going to run through what is the story behind our work on this. We have a baseline. So looking back 10 years ago, we had a baseline saying that it was a research done on youth knowledge and attitudes towards global challenges, and this research showed that youth in Norway have got knowledge about the facts in the world, but they are lacking a holistic understanding of global interdependence, and they were also lacking understanding of root causes behind global poverty and economic inequality. They were lacking understanding of power relations and connections between why rich countries are rich and poor countries are poor. So that was where we started from an NGO or non-formal education perspective 10 years ago. And we used this research as an argument towards our politicians. What has happened, I must say, 10 years later, is that there are several discourses that I think has changed. One, the discourse of education is changed. When we talked about the purpose of education 10 years ago, the Ministry of Education would say, the main purpose with school is to teach the kids to read, write, and count. We shall not teach them about climate change or poverty. That was 10 years ago, and we was not allowed to make a space to discuss it. Now in 2020, this is what has happened. Now the Ministry of Education would say the main purpose with education is to learn competencies to meet the main challenges in our world. And now they don't see read, write, and count as a conflict regarding challenges in the world. So that has actually changed, that view of learning and teaching. And then a second, this is a summary, right? So I could go deep into this, but I'm just trying to sum up the main discourses of change. And the other discourse that has changed during these 10 years is that in 2010, education for sustainable development was understood primarily as environmental education. And it was also always a talk of how to change behavior on a local and individual level. While in 2020, everyone agrees that there has to be 3 dimensions. So that teaching about education for sustainable development or sustainable development, we have to address the economic, social, and environmental aspects and look at them integrated. Another interconnection is the levels, the geographical levels. So now it's not enough to talk about the local or individual level. We are always trying to see this in relation to the global, regional, national, and local level. And that makes a different perspective of the whole approach. So I think those are the main things that has changed during these 10 years. And we could also see that through the SDGs and through Target 4.7, we finally got a tool where ESD now is mainstream into the education for all discourse in Goal 4. Meanwhile, 10 years ago, it was a conflict when we gathered education for all actors. That was a conflict between them and education for sustainable development. Whereas now, it's not a conflict between them. One core message that has been used a lot in our context is inspired by the Folk High School, the Norwegian Folk High School, where Brita Putu, that is here. They had a pedagogy for the rich project, and we used some quotes from that in every context, education context we went. What is needed now is not necessarily to teach the poor how to read and write, but to re-educate the rich in the north. And that was said by Sibusisi Bengu, that was under the Ministry of Education under Nelson Mandela. And that was an important quote from the Rio meeting in 1992 that made after this created a space for discussions on ESD that was before that not possible. So that I want to keep this quote high up so we remember where we come from. All right, our strategy. I'm going to talk a little bit about our strategy to get this discourse is changing. First of all, it was 10 years of advocacy from actors from non-formal education sector. And a crucial factor behind that is that in Norway, we are happy that the government is funding the NGOs, not only in regards to projects, but also in regards to critical policy work and development, education, awareness raising. Without this funding, I don't think this would have been possible. The second thing I want to mention is creating broad network of multi-stakeholder approach. So based on Arjen Wohl's, this professor in education for sustainable development, he always argues that one important factor for change is combining the big four. That means having different stakeholders approaching the same vision. So what we did was to bring civil society organizations, NGOs, together with teachers union, school pupils union, higher education institutions and researchers. And we made spaces for dialogue and discussions, and we shared strategies systematically. And then we worked systematically on this strategy funded by the Norwegian government. I think also I want to mention that we tried always to be a little bit before the process, the official process. So we were always a bit before. And we used the international networks as we had. And we also used other countries as a great example. We always said, like, to our Ministry of Education, we always would say, yeah, look to Finland, what they have. Why don't we have that? That's so simple, but it works. And then the last thing I want to mention when it comes to strategy is implementation on all levels. I know this can differ a little bit from culture to culture, but on the other hand, during my research, because my research is to see how SDG 47 is implemented in different countries, I would say that it's always a policy level that we have to meet. So we have to make sure that ESD is integrated into official papers, white papers, national strategies, action plans. So the target group here will be ministries of education and the directorates. Then the second level is always national curricula, and it should be pointed out that both core subjects and specific curriculum have to be looked at. The third level is teachers' education. And then if these three levels if ESD is implemented in these three levels, then the practical didactical level can be explored from a teacher's view. Okay, in the end, we realized that ESD is actually a concept no one can disagree with. So we used a lot of time figuring out good questions for the policy makers. And in the end, everyone was agreeing that, yeah, of course, we need to implement ESD. We also used Wolfgang Klafki because sometimes we were met with like, oh no, this is political and ideological issues. That's nothing we can deal with in the school, which is, I don't agree with that point of view, because everything is normative in schools. Although ESD is always considered more normative than other things, but everything is normative. But in regard to that, we used Klafki, which is a famous pedagogic inspirator in the Nordic countries. And he said that every learning process should start with the most important key problems within the paradigm of each generation. So we also use that as a core argument. And although these key problems can be geographically and culturally specific, there are some epoch-typical key problems, he said, that actually are universal and timeless. And pointing out the universal and timeless key problems, he said he will bring up, Klafki brings up, one, living conditions. So every human being needs to have basic needs and living conditions. And that's why we must address global inequality and poverty regarding sustainable development. Second, of course, environment and climate. The third is peace and conflict. The fourth is existential and relation question. And Klafki says that love is important for every human being, actually. And the fifth is technology. So those 5 is Klafke's universal and timeless epoch typical key problems. And we use them as an argument for saying that this is not ideologically rooted. It's actually coming from the field of pedagogics. And on the other hand, we also have this argument from the directorate and ministry that, oh no, all these global issues, they are too difficult for kids to understand. So we have to wait until they are 17 to explore these fields. And then as a teacher, I would say that is wrong. We cannot address our own adult concepts for kids, but we can always explore the same global complex interconnections, but using examples that are simple. So any kid in any school can explore where the football comes from, where the trousers come from, and where the banana is coming from. And everyone can address the question of, are these produced sustainable or not? And we, instead of being one teacher expert, we can explore these phenomena together with the kids. And that's how more and more schools are converting their didactical direction right now, actually. So in primary school, we would probably take up their mobile phone and explore that, or their Levi's trousers. And then high school, they would probably explore international divisional labor, which is an abstraction. So it's all about using words in the right level. Remaining challenges, because it's not just a happy story. We do have huge challenges still. And one is the missing dimension in our curricula, and that is the economic dimension of sustainable development. I don't personally, I'm not happy with how we were not able to include that one enough. And that is harmful because poverty, inequality, interdependence, and power relations are weak in our curricula. So this still has to be worked on. And I see that in my research in many countries, that this dimension is lacking. Then it is when we come to levels of implementation, the teacher's education. We are not satisfied with the curriculum and guidelines for the teacher's education. And I find it a bit hard to work with because teachers' education institutions, they want to do whatever they like. So their autonomy is a threat for ESD in the teacher's education. All right. Are there any questions? No, we can wait a little bit with the questions because I think my time is running out. So now I'm going to ask you some questions and then I can open up for questions. And my questions for you is easy. I would like you to all draw a scale from 0 to 10, where 10 is the best. And I would like to ask you, A, how important do you think education for sustainable development is on your scale? So if you don't find it very important, then you'd write 1 or 2. If you find it extremely important, then you write 10. B, to what extent do you feel this ESD was part of your own schooling when you went to school? And C, how satisfied are you with the integration of ESD in your own context? And just put down the number that you immediately get in your head. It's nothing to consider and use a lot of time on. And then I would please ask you to put this in the messenger field because it's so interesting for us to generalize this and see where are people. So can you please do that? That would be very nice. All right.
So now I'll just show this first Mentimeter, the results from that. What must happen in your context for enhancing education for sustainable development. So here you have answered like this: demand, funding, education, innovation, empowerment, environment, knowledge sharing, participation, focus on local needs, sustainable STEAM skills, creative playful methods, awareness raising, lifelong guidance, creativity, prioritization, invest in their education, many local good practices, cooperation, methods, green experimental zones, economic dimension, as Judith just mentioned, communities as classrooms, flexibility, integrated immigrants, relate to global, know-how and sharing. And the results, and this was the thing that I just put into the chat, that we would love to hear from you. What do you need to learn more about? So we will look into that, and we will have webinars also next year. So based on what we will get, we will plan our webinars based on that. So now is your golden chance to get exactly the kind of webinar you are interested in. Then I would also like to mention that these former webinars that we had in the summer and also the seminar in the autumn, so you can see them. They have also been what is it? Inspelade, recorded. So you can actually find them also on the net. So please check them, and there you find more about these same issues. And then I think I have a final thank you thank you slide, and we would really like to thank. It was really nice that you attended here, and there are still, according to my clock, 1 minute. If someone still has something that you would like to share or to ask from Henrika or Judith or me, or maybe some of the participants, please do. And it's great that you have shared your thoughts also here in the chat. So there you can also find great references over there.